The Smiling Human podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to experience more of these shows into the future, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Hello, and welcome to The Smiling Human, where collectively we evolve through inquiry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. My name is Oak, and I'm your host. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Bryan Hardy. Bryan is a holistic health and nutrition coach who helps men transform their lives by transforming their health from the inside out with the Vital Man method. He's been obsessed with health, nutrition, and the power of the mind since his near-death experience in 2010, and since has committed himself to helping men fix their digestion, reclaim their energy, and rewire their minds so that they can live the life that they were born for. Ours is an insightful and exciting conversation where Bryan offers his insights and takes on modern health and a direction for men to take who are looking to maximize their strength, vitality, and overall well-being. I hope you enjoy. Fantastic. Bryan, thank you so much for being a part of the Smiling Human podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's great to reconnect, and I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, I'll ask you the question that I ask each guest at the head of the show, which is, what is the last thing that made you smile?
Ooh, that's an easy one. Last night, we got back to our cottage here, and it was after dark, and I took the dog for one last little pee on the road there. And I mean, just to paint the picture, there's no street lights, there's no light pollution, it's dark. And looking down the street, there was fireflies lighting up and like pulsing like 10 times in a row all over the street, in the trees. It was like tiny camera flashes going off at a concert. And it was quite magical. So that was definitely a big smiling moment.
I don't know if I would believe my eyes if I saw that many fireflies. That's extraordinary. I don't think I've ever actually seen one, to be honest with you. Because out west, we don't really have them here. So that's extraordinary. Yeah. So the guests had a little bit of an introduction to you at the head of the show with the intro. But I am maybe privileged because we've had a great conversation beforehand, and I know a bit about the magic that you're doing. And so I want to dive right in. The question that had bubbled up in me that seems most relevant and prominent here for you requires maybe a bit of a preamble. We know that we're living in a highly toxic world. And I mean that not just in terms of the chemicals, but also mental toxins and cultural toxins and things like this. And for men who are looking to optimize, to be in their greatest feeling sense of strength, of masculinity, of capability, the greatest sense of peace inside themselves and thus inside their relationships, this infiltration of toxicity is, I think, front and center where we should be looking, because all of our internal harmony starts from what enters into the body. And so when I think about pseudoestrogens or microplastics, artificial flavorings, inflammation inducing all sorts of other different chemicals, this is what comes to my mind immediately. And so what I wanted to ask you, Bryan, is what are the main culprits, if you will, of the deterioration of men's health today that you notice?
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big question. And one that I know very well and very intimately, having had my health deteriorate temporarily at a very young age. And not to go into that in too much depth, and I've told that story many times other places, but essentially my appendix ruptured when I was 18, nearly killed me, and then introduced me to the fact that modern medicine had no answers for how to create health. It had a lot of answers for how to prevent death and to deal with emergencies, which I'm extremely grateful for. I would not be here without that, but it didn't know how to teach me to be well and to live well and to be self-empowered around my health. And so what I see today is what a good friend of mine, Yarrow Willard, who's actually from out west as well, you probably know him, what he described in a recording we made together years ago as nature deficiency disorder. Nature deficiency disorder. And he sees this as one of the foundational things that is really disconnecting us from our vitality, from how we're designed to feel and to function and to thrive in that way. And it takes many forms, right? It takes the form of spending all of our time inside, or most of it, spending the most of our time on screens, spending most of our time in postures that are very limiting and constricting. Having our food be, as you said, infiltrated with toxicity, with artificial additives, preservatives, all kinds of junk. And so we've got this combination of dysregulated nervous systems because of a mismatch with our sleep and wake cycles, the artificial light we're exposed to, the kinds of things that we're doing with our time, which tend to be overly stimulating, especially in the evening hours. If we're scrolling our phone or watching Netflix or whatever it is, it's highly stimulating as we're meant to be winding down, around like candles or fire. Traditionally, from like an ancestral context, which is, of course, what our biology is built for and adapted to. And so that's a big piece, right? It's a big piece of this circadian mismatch. Cycles are messed up. That throws off the energy. That throws off the hormonal cycles, throws everything off. And then you combine it with both chronic nutrient deficiencies because it's just not in the food, right? The therapeutic doses of vitamins, minerals, different plant phytochemicals, they're not necessarily in the food to the degree that we need in order to cope with the stress of modern life. Because the more stressed out our system is, and I'm talking stress in the form of toxicity, of mental emotional stress, of nutritional stress, and physical stress, right? Like working out really intensely is stressful. And if you don't have a way to recover from that stress, you can do more harm than good. And so the piece there is that the more stressed we are across any of those domains, the more nutrients we need to keep up with the demands on a cellular level. And so you've got this very interesting situation where we're more stressed in many cases than ever, right? And about different things than we were in the past. It's not about like finding food to survive or being kicked out of the tribe. It's like, money and business and relationships and all these things. And doing that in this soup of technological radiation, EMF, etc. And so that's the modern version of the chronic stress. Combine that with the nutrient deficiencies and toxicities. Combine that with, in many cases, a lack of community, or at least a lack of strong social cohesion and bonds. For us men, I think about like, if a man doesn't have at least two guys in his life that he could call up in a time of need, just to be heard, witnessed, supported, whatever he needs. If you don't have at least that, like that's a problem. That's a massive problem. And the science shows that, loneliness and social disconnection or isolation is as bad as smoking like a pack and a half of cigarettes every day on your physical health. And so it is dangerous to be isolated, just like it's dangerous to be surrounded by toxicity, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and not have a toolkit or not have some kind of armoring to buffer the effects of that against yourself. And I mean, we could go on and on and on in terms of like porn and video games and, drug use and all kinds of things that can take various forms of what I would call like compulsive addictive behaviors in order to numb or sedate or avoid feeling what we're feeling, or just deal with what we're dealing with in the way that we know best or the way that we've been taught. But that's what I see. That's what I see. It's this utter disconnect from understanding who we are as men and as human beings and as mammals, and what we need in order to thrive. And then trying to find our way through the chaotic, mess of modernity, and discern what is actually useful, what is not useful, and how can I feel like I am connected and supported and valued, even if things aren't going well in other areas of my life, right? Like, do I have a sense that at a foundational level that I have value, that I have worth, that I'm here for a reason, that I have purpose? If we don't have those things, it's going to be really hard to build on top of that. And
Hmm.
I don't say that to intimidate people or to make them feel bad if they don't have those things. More so just to bring awareness to the challenges ahead. Because that's where we have to start if we are going to, start to chip away at this and start to find a better path.
Agreed. So, what I'm hearing from you, Bryan, and what I'd like to mirror back for the audience is that there is a multifaceted tangle of elements that are contributing to this downfall of the modern man in terms of mental health, emotional health, and communal health. And if we are looking to optimize, we have to get innately familiar not only with the different avenues through which these toxicities and misalignments infiltrate our lives, but also what a natural baseline would be. And I think you touched on that as well, where if we are not operating within a more holistic conception of ourselves, we're not just a brain in a vat. We are, in fact, an embodied conscious being with needs and wants and a role in a community, and that our cells have a particular desire and need for myriad different nutrients in order to function properly. Without such a conception, we end up seeking things that do not feed us. In fact, they might feel like they feed us, but they're taking from us ultimately. And this is something I think that I would just love to emphasize even more, is that in order to reclaim and to take ownership and stewardship of our well-being on all fronts, we have to understand what we are, because understanding what we are tells us what we need. And you touched on a few. Community is a big piece that cannot be understated. The loneliness epidemic is contributing, I think, in a great deal to what we see as the mental health crisis, the crisis of meaning, and the suicide crisis for men. I know men's mental health awareness month is, fresh in our minds as of recording here. So if there are men out there, as I'm sure there are, myself included, who know that there's something off on a bodily, this realm of feeling. It's like, I don't feel as energized in the morning, or I don't feel as, virile or motivated, or there's this fog. What are the telltale signs of an internal dysfunction for men?
Yeah. So it's a few things. And I love that you brought up Men's Mental Health Month. Um, and I did a post last week, and being a bit cheeky, but also being very serious, that if we were to rebrand Men's Mental Health Month as Men's Gut Health or Men's Holistic Health Month, I think it'd be a lot more effective at actually driving change and not just bringing up a bunch of awareness and talking about a bunch of nice sounding things, or raising money for various causes, all of which is fine. But if it doesn't leave someone more empowered and physically feeling better and more energized, it's going to be very hard to make progress, right? Because depression is not just like a deficiency of antidepressants or a deficiency of any particular chemical. And it's a whole being kind of a thing. And when your energy is low because you're, again, poisoned, deficient, stressed out, it's very hard for your body to express excitement, to express joy, to express positivity, because you don't have the building blocks that allow that biochemistry to take place. And so for me, the things I look for are, can you function without your morning coffee, right? Or tea or whatever, your cigarette, whatever it is. And I'm not demonizing those things. I like tea. I like microdoses of nicotine in clean forms. I don't smoke it. If I was going to smoke it, I'd probably smoke like a cigar or something and just, taste it. Because, side note, but a friend of mine mentioned this really is stuck with me so powerfully. And anyone who's done any sort of medicine work, indigenous ceremony of different kinds, tobacco is usually present in some form. And it's a very revered plant and a very, sacred plant and teacher and ally. But he shared this quote, which was that tobacco doesn't want to be in your lungs, but it loves to be in your mouth. And it stuck with me. And it stuck with me because if people just, smokers, etc., would just practice the tasting of tobacco, not the inhaling of tobacco into a place where it's very damaging, and very injurious to our health, they likely have a much healthier, more balanced relationship with that plant. Now, that's a sidebar that we don't have to get into. But just to say, I'm not a Puritan. I'm not someone who thinks you should be a monk and live off of like brown rice and chickpeas and never have any fun and have no passion and have no mind-altering experiences or substances as part of your toolkit. Not at all. I've tried the gamut. I like tinkering, and I like to find what works for me. But what I know doesn't work for me, and what I know doesn't work for most people I talk to, is starting the day with stimulation, usually in the form of coffee or tea, and requiring that stimulation to feel like you can function, right? So this chronic low energy is a big one, which leads into like brain fog and kind of just not feeling sharp, not feeling engaged mentally. Big sign there that something's off. Any sort of digestive issue, whether it's heartburn, acid reflux, bloating after meals, tiredness after meals, feeling really heavy, feeling very gassy, right? As funny as it is for us guys to like fart and, make fart humor, it's not normal to be farting all the time. And it's a sign of dysfunction down the chain in terms of digestion. The patient, another massive one, right? And you'll see that most of the things I'm talking about are gut-centric because digestion is the core of our health. And it's where I start, and it's where so many people need to look when they're not finding satisfactory answers on more of a mental or energetic side. And they're trying to like use these Band-Aid approaches to feel better. Usually, if we start with their gut, things tend to improve, right? And so you can even see it in skin issues, acne, eczema, all these things relate back to the gut and back to the foods we're eating or not eating, and the way our body's able to handle them. So for me, I think brain, belly, body, energy, digestive issues of any kind, and then, ability to feel energized, feel motivated, feel excited, and recover from stress. If those things are not there, then something's definitely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Is the stimulation piece is so central now because everything is either an extreme upper or an extreme downer. We've got incredibly refined sugars and a culture that promotes overconsumption of alcohol. Either we got to get all the way up or all the way down. And this natural baseline is, well, it's homeostasis. The body is yearning for homeostasis, for a state of balance. And in fact, everything that the body does is constantly trying to bring itself back to a state of balance. And so when we're introducing highly stimulating things like caffeine or refined sugar or alcohol or other substances, that's going to tip the scales. And like you're saying, we live life. We're not preaching a monastic lifestyle, but recognizing the degree to which those scales tip means that we have to bring it back in equal measure. And what that does is it costs the body. Anytime we have a big spike of something, if it's sugar or if it's serotonin from, party drugs or what have you, the body pays for it in another way. And just like you're saying, the increased stress on the body makes an increased demand for nutrients. It's the same on an emotional level, I think, as well, where when we're not adequately addressing how we feel, what the emotional state is, what the mental state is, and we're not healthily coping with these different stressors, we turn to these kinds of substances because they are substitutes in that way. And I love that you named the skin as well, for a brief aside here, because for those who don't know, the skin is one of the greatest indicators of health across the board. If you are trying to figure out if someone's, healthy, well, they say, oh, they're radiant. Oh, they're just glowing. They're so vital and fresh. It's like, that's because the inside pushes itself out. And anything that's inside gets eventually pushed out through the skin, through the sweat glands, through the pores, and all these types of things. And so if you're noticing this in your own body, that maybe if you eat something, you have a flare-up of flare-up of inflammation. This podcast is a flare-up of information. If you notice that you eat something and you have a flare-up of inflammation or you start to develop acne, it's what I want to say here is like, you are the steward of the vehicle of your body, and it is incumbent upon us as men to recognize the signs that the body is giving. What language is the body speaking when it's trying to tell us that it's yearning for homeostasis? And that's something that really stands out to me. another piece that we haven't touched on here, but I wanted to see, get your thoughts on, is the hormonal aspect. We have a great deal of hormone disruptors, endocrine disruptors, these types of chemical infiltrants that are just dropping testosterone in men at levels we've never ever seen before. And I imagine, and you can tell me what you think of this, that this is resulting not only in the lowering of testosterone in the blood, low motility for the spermatozoa, but I think it also is having a great effect on mental health as well. I get the sense, and I'm not a doctor, but healthy testosterone levels inside the men's body contribute to the homeostatic emotional mental well-being. Is that a fair picture?
100%. And if you talk to anybody who's like, over 40 or 50 and was really feeling not like themselves, really struggling, and then they worked with a good doctor to get on testosterone replacement, they're typically like reborn by that experience. They feel like, oh my God, like I'm myself again. And it's not to say that at the first sign of dysfunction, you should run out and get hormonal replacement, because that's a really serious decision. And it's a lifelong decision that you need to be committed to and ready to take on, and have a good professional who can monitor you through that process to make sure it's all going as planned. But it is game changing when you get your hormones away from this chronic stress and chronic depletion. So like excess estrogen, excess cortisol, decreases in testosterone, to name a few of the most common ones, when you can correct that and see that corrected on a test. And just to, bookmark this, signs and symptoms are great, and you can get so far just from what the body is telling you. Like my whole training was based on that as a holistic nutritionist and health coach. You can get very far, very, very far. And really good comprehensive blood work is so helpful in the process, both to have an objective measurement that reflects and validates what you're feeling, and to know, okay, it's not just me, I'm not just broken, there's actual things that I can change and can affect here that are measurable, which is really good both mentally to get engaged in the process of your own health improvement, but also to be able to track progress and to see, okay, all the work I've put in for 3 months, 6 months, it's worth it. Not just because I feel better, which is, I would say, primary, but also because I can prove it, right? And I can take this to a doctor or to someone who may have said, oh, it's all in your head, or, oh, nutrition doesn't matter, or whatever nonsense, some traditional doctors spout off as they dismiss your concerns. You can bring this to them and say, hey, look, this is my test before, this is my test after, this is what I did. Like, do you have anything to say? And most of the time they'll just say, oh, that's interesting, keep doing what you're doing. But either way, for those of you who have been dismissed and have been sort of put through the ringer of testing and specialists and getting nowhere, starting with comprehensive blood work, which is easier and easier to get these days, especially in Canada, where we're being kind of handcuffed in terms of what we have access to in terms of testing. But that's changing very rapidly. And there's some really exciting things coming down the pipe, and that even people like myself who aren't medical doctors can work with. So just to say, the testing is really important. Yes, the hormonal, correcting hormones and optimizing hormones will tend to take a man from feeling utterly depressed and burnt out and unable to effectively build strength, build muscle, recover from exercise, have sexual drive and libido, and be excited about connecting with his partner or a potential partner, as opposed to, I could take it or leave it, which is where a lot of guys sadly end up. And I don't believe we're designed to like hit 50 and then just stop having sex and lose our fire and lose our drive. But that is the part of the modern normal, that is just called aging, which we don't have to accept, right? There's a lot we can do to slow down or even reverse that process, so we can have youthful longevity for as many years as possible. It's very, very in the year 2025, that's never been easier, I would say. But yeah, hormones are huge, they're massive. And if you've got things going on, either from a detoxification point of view or a genetic point of view, or just an outright deficiency, right? If you don't have enough vitamin D or zinc in your diet or your supplementation, you're not going to produce ideal testosterone. It's just not going to happen. So it's very, very important. And it's something that I encourage everyone who can get that kind of testing done to get that done. So they have a baseline, and then you can build from there.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Now, when you're working with men who are looking to come back into greater health, greater alignment, greater balance, is there a sheet, like a list of things that you would say just get it out? If it's a cleaning product or if it's in the food, things that we just ought to avoid entirely if we're really committed to owning our optimal health journey.
Yeah. So the easiest one to look at is like cleaners and personal care products, because those tend to be some of the worst. The food side, I mean, more and more people are aware, more and more people are reading labels, more and more people know instinctively that if, the fewer ingredients and the fewer, the less amount of processing a food has gone through, typically the better it's going to be, right? The whole idea of shopping the perimeter of the store instead of all the aisles in the middle, except for, maybe some vinegar or some, I don't know, mustard or something, that you can get a very clean version of, and it's totally fine. But besides that, there's a lot of boxed processed garbage in the center of the store, that you just don't need. And so the food front, it's those simple rules, whole foods as much as possible. If you can't pronounce it or don't know what it is, or, if you look it up on, there's some really great apps. One I love called Yuka, Yuka, which is totally free, where you can scan labels in a store and it'll tell you what's in there and how good or not and dangerous potentially that those things are. So you want to empower yourself with that kind of information and knowledge. But then from there, the things that are typically the worst, specifically in terms of hormonal disruption, are going to be colognes, deodorants, personal care products, anything with a lot of scenting to it. So really powerful artificial scent can tend to be really hormonally disruptive. That's like laundry detergent, dryer sheets, or fabric softener, all this stuff that you see advertised as like, fresh, Febreze fresh or Lysol fresh or whatever it is. It's like the only way to get fresh air is to open your windows, right? You don't spray a bunch of chemicals and make your air fresh. You spray a bunch of chemicals and make your already toxic indoor air much worse. And so, yeah, if you can't eat it or safely ingest it in some capacity, you probably shouldn't put it on your skin. That's a good rule of thumb, because you're going to put it on your skin. It's going to get absorbed somehow or some way. So if you can't eat it, don't put it on your skin. That's a great rule, which will take you like 95+% of the way to optimal. And then when it comes to cleaners, chemicals, things like that, honestly, there's not much you can't do with vinegar and baking soda when it comes to cleaning. And then you can always opt for the scent-free versions of, laundry detergent, dish detergent, whatever it is. And just make sure that you're not putting stuff into your environment that is going to, disrupt your natural balance. And so if you can smell it and it smells artificial, or it smells so, chemical fresh, whatever that is, that's a bad sign in terms of how your body is going to receive that.
Yeah, for the audio only listeners, I've been making faces the entire time Bryan's talking about these scented experiences. It's one of the absolute banes of my existence. As soon as I started to clean my own system, my sensitivity towards artificial toxins raised immediately. When I smell someone with perfume, it's like knives in my nose, or like laundry. People, you're like, oh, I love the smell of this. It's like I can feel that it's not right. And along the line of cleaners, before we take a break here for the second half, lemon peel and vinegar, you can make your own homemade cleaners with lemon peels. It's like it's extraordinarily effective for all sorts of different multi-purpose cleaning. And again, it's these pieces where we have to take control and action in response to the temptation of convenience, where when we have the ability to just go and grab a $4 whatever bleach substitute with all sorts of crap in it, or we can take the 25 minutes it takes to make our own cleaner, well, sure, you save 25 minutes in the short term, but you're costing your cellular health in a way that is far, far greater than that time saved. So I think that goes a long way in terms of that Yucca app you mentioned, reading, learning, understanding what could be present in the food, could be present in the personal healthcare products, and then making the adjustments one by one. Doesn't have to be a sweeping thing overnight, right? Okay, you run out of deodorant, you get one that doesn't have all of this endocrine disruptors in it. Great, something more natural, maybe coconut oil based. You run out of laundry detergent. Maybe you make your own. Maybe you use borax. Maybe you use something. I don't know if borax is good, but it's like one of the older ones that's sort of more mineral based. And just piece by piece, you can start to rid your life of these toxins that are absolutely non-negotiably having a negative impact on your health. So with that, we'll take a short break and we'll come back with the second half of the show. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about just how you can help this show grow into the future. Did you know that we have an Instagram, a YouTube, and a Patreon? Probably. But if you're listening on YouTube, like many of you are, I would invite you to subscribe, to like this video if you've enjoyed it, and to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions or maybe guests that you want me to interview. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or any other podcast platform, then please take this moment to rate the show. All of these actions go a long way to helping the Smiling Human podcast reach more people and grow into the future. Thank you so much. All right, we are back with the second half of the show, which means we are into the section called The Question of the Week. This is where I invite our guests to bring forward an inquiry, something that is important to them. Maybe they want my take on it, or they think it'll be valuable for you, the listener, to hear us discuss. So, Bryan, what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so Oak, my question is, do you have or have you in the past, whether on a trip, on a retreat, at a specific experience of some sort, have you had a pre-meal routine? Something to ground you, something to relax you, something to prepare your nervous system to be able to, get the most out of that experience and out of the actual things you're going to consume. I would love to hear any experience that you've had or do practice in that regard.
Yeah, what a beautiful question. And very intimate too, because what is more personal than our own nourishment, hey? I have oscillated between my relationship to food, between being something that is more maybe mechanical or going through the paces and something that is more artful and intentional. I notice that when I have the opportunity to share meals with other people, I lean more to the side of intentionality, offering prayer and gratitude, being able to rest in and really imbibe the presence of the other people. And so quick prayers beforehand, that's typically a big piece of it. A few breaths, maybe even giving thanks to the food, naming the farmers, all the truck drivers, everybody that allowed their work to make this meal possible. This kind of thing has been in the past rather alive. Another thing that is maybe less attuned to the emotional spiritual side is the timing and what I consume and the order of what I consume. So more typically, if I'm going to have some heavier meal, maybe it's my sausages and eggs or something that's going to be more protein rich and require greater digestion, I will be sure to have some kombucha or some kombucha vinegar and water or something beforehand to prep the system, awaken the system. Sometimes that's fruit as well. I'll be sure to have a piece of fruit maybe 15 minutes before, just to get the enzymes rolling, to get the whole system turning online. And I do that because I keep space between my meals, at least 2 hours, usually 3 hours. And I fast for 15 to 16 hours each day as well. So in doing so, I'm trying to give my body ample opportunity to do the digestion at the stomach level that it needs, get things all the way through before putting more food in, right? And so a part of that ritual is attuning to the timing, attuning to the body, the orientation or the order of what I'm eating, and then also bringing in a level of gratitude. That would be sort of where I'm operating at right now.
Amazing. And that's great. That's great, and it's uncommon. I'll tell you that. Outside of our kind of holistic, spiritual health kind of circles, it's very uncommon, um, and very essential, very supportive. I would say, because so often we think all we have to do is eat the right things, right? Oh, I'm eating well, right? I'm eating well. I'm eating healthy stuff. But if you're having your, $20 organic, poke bowl while driving in rush hour traffic on a phone call, your stomach and your nervous system are not in a receptive, calm, rest and digest state to actually be able to break that stuff down and absorb it and assimilate it and eliminate, the junk, right? So that's going to just pass right through you. And I see that so often that people are quote unquote doing the right things, eating the right stuff, but they still feel like crap, or they still feel like they're not getting the most out of what they're consuming. And so there's a framework I learned from a great mentor years ago, Dr. Sachin Patel, and it's the 4 C's of digestion, which I'd love to share here if that's all right with you, which is to choose, chill, chew, and cherish. And you can put cherish in front of chew or chew in front of cherish. Either way, it works. So the idea is that digestion starts in your brain, right? It starts when you start thinking about what you're going to have. And so you're making a decision of this thing. Ideally, you enjoy it. Ideally, you can look forward to it. It's tasty. And that starts this, release of enzymes and the process of your body gearing up to have this meal. From there, you want to chill. So chill is like taking 5 deep breaths, right? Or saying a word of prayer, saying a word of gratitude, saying a word of thanks, just sitting, in silence for 30 seconds. I do exactly what you do, connecting to the food, all of the people and places and things that brought this literal miracle of nourishment into my, experience. And that can be wonderful. That can be super grounding and just open the heart a little bit and relax the system. If you've got people around the table, joining hands, taking breaths together, maybe chanting together, a nice big sacred om is sort of a thing we used to do at retreats as a way to begin a mealtime, which works really well, and which kids love, by the way, too. It's really fun bringing kids into this kind of thing because they're on board, right? They're like, oh, this is cool. This is fun. The adults who've never done it are so like awkward and nervous and embarrassed, but the kids get right into it. But I say this, so that's choose and chill, and then chew is self-explanatory, right? Most people do not chew their food. They chew like one bite, 2 bite, 3 bite, swallow, right? It's gone. They're done their meal in 5-10 minutes. Your stomach doesn't have teeth, right? There's no masticator, inside your gut. So whatever is not chewed here is not going to get further broken down from a mechanical level, down the pipe. And so if you want to get the most out of your food, you have to chew that stuff. And ideally you want to chew it until there's no, noticeable chunks or pieces. It's like you're making baby food in your mouth before you swallow. That's huge. I've had people fix digestive issues just from that alone, right? Just learning to chew their food. And they're like, oh, I don't have acid reflux and I'm not bloated after meals. Imagine that. All I had to do is chew my food. So that's huge. And then the last one, cherish, which again, you can put this before or after the chew or just infuse it into the whole experience, which is just that mindfulness of gratitude and appreciation for this food that in most cases you didn't have to work for or, physically like break your back for or go hunt something or farm for months on end, right? You went to the store, you bought it off a shelf, you bought it from a vendor at a farmer's market. Obviously, you had to do something to get the money to exchange, right? I don't want to discount that, but still, the gross physical labor that went into that is, been completely outsourced and, brought down for like pennies, essentially, compared to what you're receiving in many cases. And those 4 things, choose, chill, chew, cherish, if you can keep that in mind for the listeners, and if this is completely foreign to you and you think, how am I going to do that? Right? I'm at like work. I'm in a busy cafeteria. Like, how am I going to do this? Take a chance, be courageous. Even if you do it silently for yourself, just close your eyes for a second, bring a smile to your face, think about your food, and then get into it. You'll probably inspire someone who's watching you and you don't even realize. because they realize, oh, they're like, that person's different. They're not just sucked into their screen while they're scarfing down their food mindlessly. But the other piece there is that how you eat and what you said, even when you eat, and the order in which you consume things matters, right? All of that matters, and all that has an impact. And so specifically, if you're not feeling great, or you're feeling like your gut is inflamed or just heavy and slow, these are the simple, free things that you can practice to seriously move the needle.
I love that. Choose, chill, chew, and cherish. It's fascinating to dwell on the notion, and I say notion, it's not an idea, it is a very real phenomenon, that our internal state and disposition towards what we are doing, in this case, eating, changes the body's ability to assimilate nutrients. This is not made up. When we are tuned in and actually in that more regulated nervous system state, combined with adequate chewing, which is producing the enzymes, we're signaling to every cell of our digestive system that something important is coming in. We have the time, space, and energy to take it in, to assimilate. We're not under threat. And that it's actually really good for us, that we want this. So get as much as you can from it. This habit that we've come into culturally of always being on our phones, and I'm guilty of it as well. I'll have the hockey game on, or I'm not anymore because the Oilers lost, but I'll have something on while I'm eating. It's actually running two separate systems that are not supposed to be taking place at the same time. And this reminds me of a quote: how to be more charismatic and how to have more presence in the world as a man. When you're doing something, you do only that thing. So when we're eating, we're only eating. If we're having a conversation, we're only conversing. And this notion, again, here's that word, of committing fully to whatever it is that we're doing actually has a marked and measurable physical impact on the results of whatever it is that we're doing. So in the terms of food, like we're saying, our capacity to assimilate, the inflammation drops, our ability to digest and eliminate properly is ameliorated. If it's in conversation, we're connected more, intimacy is present, we're co-regulating. It's almost as though life is supposed to be an entirely immersive experience. My
Imagine
God.
that.
So,
Imagine that.
yeah, really. What a surprise. I love that. So you talked about supplementation briefly in the first half, and I want to sort of bring this back around when we're talking about rituals and food and the sort of timing and all these things. It sometimes feels like there's so much that we should be doing, right? And for the listeners, I threw some heavy air quotes here. We should be doing intermittent fasting. We should be avoiding seed oils. We should be supplementing this. And there's all of these, almost too many of these options for us as humans and as men when it comes to optimal living, optimal eating, and optimal health. And so the role of supplementation, it's a tricky one. I've worked in this field before. I used to be the manager of the supplement department in an organic health food store. And so I know all that world very well. It's familiar to me. And what I know too is that from our food, that's the best source for our nutrients. But as you mentioned in the first half as well, Bryan, so much of our soils worldwide have been depleted of the nutrients necessary to make the foods dense enough to be truly nourishing. And that's a depressing topic unto itself that we could dedicate a great deal of time discussing, but we won't get into today. And so for men who are doing their best, who are working to eliminate seed oils, artificial flavorings, packaged foods, who are aiming towards whole foods, is there a palette of supplements or something that everyone could benefit taking? I know you said zinc and vitamin D earlier. What else is on the table that we might consider adding to our regime?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, in ideal cases, you can start with testing, and that'll inform what you actually need. right? Because if someone has their vitamin D checked and it's already in the optimal range, which most people won't be, but if it is, then you don't have to take supplemental vitamin D, right? You just don't. So test when you can to assess micronutrients, to assess vitamins, minerals, etc. And in general, the things that always come up, continually come up, and that I've seen to be universally beneficial are the magnesium, are the vitamin C, are the zinc, not necessarily every day, maybe 3 times a week, right? So like pulsing it, little pulses of zinc. Now, again, you could go and have oysters once a week and get a really big dose of really bioavailable zinc. So if that's an option for you, go for it, right? If it's not, take a pill every now and then. Vitamin E is another big one that comes up, specifically because heart disease is still by far the number one killer of men. Premature death caused by cardiovascular incidents, and vitamin E seems to be uniquely protective in that sense, combined with the eliminating of the rancid fats and seed oils and deep fried foods, which can be so inflammatory. So that's a big one, and it's cheap. It's inexpensive. It's easy to come by. And vitamin K2 as well also stands out in that respect, alongside the magnesium, because if someone is eating a lot of foods that have calcium in them, which many people do just by the nature of the most common foods consumed, whether that's dairy or not, or some combination of things, you need to have vitamin K is like the organizer that tells the calcium and the other minerals where to go in the body, right? Which ideally is out of circulation into bones, teeth, etc., right? Because calcium can build up in the plaques that lead to heart disease if we're not careful, and not enough K2 and not enough magnesium will tend to drive that process, drive that buildup of minerals in the wrong place. And then the last two really would be a good B complex can be really, really useful. And again, B vitamins can be found in a myriad of foods. And so you don't necessarily need them, but many people, if they're not feeling their best or they're feeling a bit low energy, are going to tremendously benefit from a good B complex. And then the last, which I wouldn't go as far to say they've saved my life, but they have dramatically improved the quality of my life. And that's the whole class of adaptogenic herbs, right? So the rhodiolas, which is my favorite, the ashwagandha, the ginsengs, the cordyceps, mushroom, like all these things that tend to allow the body to adapt to stress, to improve physical and mental performance without the resulting crash that a stimulant is going to have. And you don't necessarily have to take it every day, right? You take it on your most stressful days. You take it on your hardest workout days. You take it on days you're sleep deprived or traveling. And you can pulse those things so your body is not necessarily getting overly accustomed to always having that present. But you take a few days off, reintroduce it, take a few days off, sprinkle it around as needed. But for me, those are the things where, I've never seen someone have a bad reaction to any of those supplements. And I've always seen some improvement, whether subtle or more, profound, take place both from a subjective experiential point of view or from what we see in their lab work in terms of getting themselves closer to optimal ranges for those nutrients, like a B12 or a red blood cell magnesium or a vitamin D, and also to bring inflammation markers, which can tend to be elevated for a number of reasons, to bring those down over time.
Brilliant. I want to offer the audience a brief description of what an adaptogen is. That might be the first time some of the listeners are hearing this word. The adaptogenic herbs that Bryan is speaking about, he named rhodiola and ashwagandha, which is actually a root, cordyceps, ginseng, reishi is another one as well. They get their name because they support the body in coming to an endocrine homeostasis. And that's why they call it adaptogens. And what's really and particularly exciting, at least in my opinion, about adaptogens is that depending on what the body needs and where it's at in its levels, these compounds behave differently. And so as an example, I explained this to people back when I was working in the health field. If you're having trouble sleeping, You could take reishi in the evening and it would help to raise your melatonin and lower your cortisol, bringing you into a more regulated state that brings you closer to sleep. You could then in the morning take that reishi and it would support raising the cortisol and lowering the melatonin. It helps the body to adapt in this way. It's a fantastic and deeply valuable set of compounds, particularly when we have already covered the dangers and the prevalence of endocrine disruptors. Getting the levels up to normal, that comes from a nutrition point of view, and then helping to stabilize them based on the varying stress experiences we have can be something that these excel at in this way. So that's just something I wanted to add in there. You've mentioned blood work and testing, and I think that that's a prime example of the need for specificity on a journey like this, right? We're not just going to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on these supplements and throw things at the wall to see what sticks, right? We need to know what our specific body is doing, what it's lacking, what it needs in order to be able to provide a meaningful roadmap for healing, for adjustments, and for optimization. You said comprehensive blood work, but I wonder, and this might be an ignorant question on my part, is it a specific test that we're looking for? If men are out there and they're curious to get their blood work done, what kind of testing should they be looking for?
Yeah. So, I mean, technically, you could probably look at hundreds and hundreds of things in the blood, right? Some of which will be really valuable and insightful, many of which will be almost useless, especially without more greater context of like how's somebody feeling and what's going on in their life. So I say comprehensive because the basic style of blood work that most people will get with like an annual checkup or a physical, or if you just have any kind of complaint and you first go to your doctor or a walk-in clinic or wherever you go, the first round of testing they're going to tend to order will be fairly basic. But you'll have your CBC, your complete blood count, which is looking at your red blood cells and your white blood cells. You'll have your lipids, your cholesterol, LDL, HDL, triglycerides. These are things that most people are aware of, familiar with, have seen on a test before. You'll have your blood sugar, right? You'll have a few minerals or electrolytes, potassium, sodium, maybe magnesium. And it kind of ends there in some cases. You might have liver enzymes, right? But it kind of ends there. At least in Ontario, where I am based, vitamin D is not typically included. You have to pay for that if it's not covered by insurance for some reason. And then all the hormones, maybe they'll include like a TSH, a thyroid stimulating hormone. If you've got metabolic issues or low energy or unexplained weight gain, they'll look at the thyroid, but they'll just look at TSH, right? So there's a whole host of, T3, T4, reverse T3, just within the thyroid category. And then you've got the testosterone, total and free testosterone, because if you have very high total testosterone, but your bioavailable testosterone is very low, then you're still going to feel deficient, right? As well as the estrogens, the DHEA, that's the building block of the hormones. And so there's these other categories. In my view, we're looking at in sort of categorical hormones, both sex hormones and thyroid hormones, and then the deeper markers of inflammation. Things like C-reactive protein or highly sensitive C-reactive protein. And without, going too technical, because if anyone wants to see like, what are these actual things, just reach out, and I can send you the exact things that I work with. And there's all kinds of companies that are looking much deeper. And if you're in the US or if you're in Canada, you're going to have different options. And I'd be happy to direct people to those resources. But rather than try to, go overly biochemically technical right now, which probably isn't the most useful thing, just know that those things are available. And also know, at least, where I am, probably where you are as well, if you get that basic blood test, that basic blood requisition form, they'll call it, which will have the boxes checked of what the doctor wants to look at, there'll be a section that says other tests, usually in the bottom right somewhere. You can write in whatever you want there and they'll test it, right? You have to pay for it out of pocket, which will probably run you from $150 to $300, depending how many tests you put in there. For about $300, you can get a very good picture of what's going on. And I would say that is money well spent, well invested in a better understanding of what's going on. But people feel like medical documents are these unchangeable, it's like the holy book. It's like I can't modify this. I'll get in trouble or something. And you can totally modify. You can write in other tests you want to have completed, and then take those other tests to a practitioner or to a coach who can help you interpret what's going on, and get way more insight from just adding like an additional 10 to 15 biomarkers, than just getting that basic panel, which will definitely illuminate if you have like a disease state going on, right? That's good to know, but it won't illuminate the deeper relationships between different systems and between different biomarkers, and allow you to really customize and personalize, as you said, that roadmap from going from where you are to where you really want to get to.
Love it. And for those listeners whose ears have perked up and interest has been piqued, as Bryan mentioned, reach out to him. But Bryan, I'd love to have you let the listeners know where they can find you, how they can get in touch for those who are interested.
Yeah, so the easiest place is probably through my website. So that's revitalizedman.com. And that's revitalized with the Z, Canadian Z at the end, not the European S, for the way they talk about optimization or revitalization. So revitalizedman.com. And also there'll be links. I know you're going to put links to my social media in the show notes, so I'm easy to reach on Facebook, on Instagram, or if you want to email me directly, it's just my first name, Bryan with a Y, Bryan, at revitalizedman.com.
Perfect. Well, Bryan, today has been deeply insightful. I've enjoyed your insights and your offering thoroughly. Thank you so much again for being a part of the Smiling Human podcast.
Absolutely my pleasure, brother. Absolutely.
And that concludes this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to receive a free gift. I've created a free insight journal. This is a 30-day self-reflection and introspection journal that you can download at no cost in the description below. Go have a look and join the journey. The second invitation I have for you is, if it feels within your means and possible for you, then please head over to patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Becoming a patron will give you access to perks like behind-the-scenes footage and access to live Q&As with me monthly. You also get voting privileges to help pick new guests or to help guide other episode content. Truly, the support of listeners like you, paid or unpaid, goes a long way. So if you can like, share, subscribe, and give a rating on the podcast app, all of that goes a long way. Thank you to each and every one of you who's been on this journey with me. See you again soon.